Hello, and welcome back to Rails Quest. So, you asked for it, and here we are. We're going to talk about Hetzner versus Fly.io for deploying Rails applications. So right off the bat, let's talk about Hetzner. Hetzner, it says, is an award-winning VPS hosting at incredibly low prices, and that pretty much nails it. So VPS hosting, that basically means they give you a server that you rent from them that's accessible on the cloud over SSH, and you can go and configure that server however you need to. Fly.io, on the other hand, you hand it a Docker image and it deploys with zero configuration. They can do load balancing, they can do all these things for you, and it's kind of a push button situation there. Very little to configure, none of it to configure manually except what goes into your Docker file. So that's the difference between them on a technology level. Now let's talk about breaking down some of the differences in their pricing strategies, their pricing models, and what they actually give you, and then what that means for you as a developer who's maybe a little bit confused about which one of these things to pick. So let's start with a basic comparison. One of the easiest things to compare is raw numbers, right? So let's look at the pricing. You can see some pricing ranging from 451 euros to 518 euros. And here's something to keep in mind. These less expensive options are actually in the EU. So the AMD CPUs are available in the US. These other CPU options are available in places like Germany, right, in the EU. So that's something to keep in mind. May or may not matter to you, but it will matter depending on where your customers are. You probably want to deploy your server closest to your core customer base. So that's that. I'm going to look at this because I'm based in the US and this is what I have available, 5.18 euros. All right, in US dollars, that's $5.46. Now, let's take a look at the pricing page for Fly.io. They have a calculator, okay, configured at the absolute lowest. I mean, really, this isn't even the absolute lowest. Let's give it at least a gigabyte volume here. So the lowest configuration you can get, the cheapest price at Fly.io, is about $4.58. So we're below this amount, but what do we actually get for 5.18 euros from an AMD CPU at Hetzner? This is what you get. You get two vCPUs, 2 gigabytes of RAM. You've got a solid state drive, 40 gigabytes of that, 20 gigabytes of traffic to and from your app, all for that like $5.50 basically in US currency. So let's take a look at what that would be on Fly.io. Let's say we've got 2 cores because that's what we've got there. We're already up very close to that price. I mean, within 1 cent, all right, 2 gigabytes of RAM, we're already up to $16. And a 40 gigabyte volume, that gets us up to $22 a month. So that's quite a price hike for similar spec machine, and that's something to keep in mind. Now, price may not be the sole determining factor in your decision to choose Fly.io or Hetzner, so let's dig into a few other things that you might want to consider. Hey, quick pause here. I'm Caleb Lape, and if you're watching this video, I'm guessing you're trying to make your software dream a reality. After a decade of building Rails apps for companies like GitHub, I've realized something. Tutorials are great, but they can't replace the experience. Every week you spend piecing together solutions is a week. You could be collecting customer feedback. You could be shipping. That's why I help founders turn their ideas into working MVPs, like the ones you're seeing here, in 30 days or less. No more tutorial hell, no more stuck projects. If you're ready to stop learning and start launching, click the link in the description. Let's get your idea in front of real customers. Now, back to the video. Fly.io gives you an excellent developer experience. If you can Dockerize your app, like I said, they make it a breeze to deploy. One command. Let's take a look. This is their guide to getting started with a Rails app. And not only is it talking about deploying a Rails app, but it's so short. I think this was their thinking. It's such a short guide to deploy a Rails app to their service that they actually had to add a little tutorial on how to spin up a brand new Rails app in addition to that. So they show spinning up a new Rails app, making a small change, and then you deploy it. This is it. You run fly launch. There's a little wizard that guides you through a tiny bit of configuration. You can choose how big of a server you want and all those things, how much you want to pay, right? And after that, within a few seconds, really, maybe a couple minutes tops, you've got your server, you've got your Rails app. not just your server, you've got your Rails app running at a URL that you can access on the web. So if you're just building a weekend project, you just want to impress your friends, and you may not even keep this thing around, deploy a Rails app to a small instance on fly.io, and you're up and running in seconds, and you don't have to think about that anymore. You can build whatever cool thing you were going to use to impress everybody, and that's what we want to do, right? They even have a command to open your app in the browser. I mean, what's not to love there? So again, you pay a little bit of the price here, but you get a great experience out of the box with Rails. On the Hetzner side of things, why would you pick Hetzner? Well, again, they are aggressively inexpensive compared to any of the other hosting options that I've compared them with. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You know, if you've got a profitable app, you may want to grab one of these big machines, and you're probably good for a long time on one of these guys. You've got plenty of storage, 32 gigabytes of RAM. You know, this is a great setup, all for only $65 a month. You know, hopefully, you know, that's one customer or just a handful. So that is a great reason to choose Hetzner, just on the pricing alone. Some other reasons that I can think of. Maybe you want to learn how to manage your own server and infrastructure. This is a great, cheap way to do that. Get one of these cheapest instances and go to town. Practice using Kamal. Practice buying a domain and wiring it up to your application. There's so many options that you can practice securing a server, right? You can learn about security, and you can even do your own penetration testing if you would like. So the options are endless, and Hetzner actually does, I don't have time to show it in this video, but they do actually have some applications that you can deploy with one click. So that's great. And just a few closing thoughts. If you were to deploy a more traditional Rails app that uses, you know, Postgres and Redis, fly.io is hard to beat in terms of auto scaling. So if you're building an app that would benefit from horizontal scaling quite a bit, you know, maybe you're doing a lot of intensive background processing and you need a lot of cores, well, maybe fly.io is a good option for you. You know, you get a lot of compute with Hetzner here, and probably, definitely, a whole lot cheaper. So if it's just processing if it's just raw processing power that you want, maybe Hetzner is what you need, and you just got one instance. But if you've got sporadic traffic that spikes quite a bit, maybe on the weekends everybody runs their reports, and you need to be able to scale up your infrastructure just for a few hours every week, maybe you would benefit more from something like fly.io. So again, these are the things to consider. If you need a lot of horizontal scaling, fly.io is really good at that and can automate most of that for you. And they're, you know, if we're going to talk about DevOps, we could go on and on and on about all the different options there. There's so much to learn. So I encourage you, whatever you do, pick something and get your app deployed. Get it in front of people. This is what it's all about. Getting your app deployed is a crucial turning point in your experience as a developer. And I encourage you to do it. Whatever it is, build something, get it deployed, whatever you use. You'll learn valuable skills along the way. And if you can deploy something on your own, and that's a skill that you did not previously have, that's a huge skill that you can use to make money, get clients. And you're a solo developer now, just in the same way that DHH talks about this being the one-person framework. So I think I've rambled on enough. I hope that gives you plenty to think about, but stop thinking. Just pick something. Go with Hetzner, go with Fly. Choose something else. It doesn't matter. Deploy your application, get it in front of people. And with that, have a blessed week. I'll see you next time.